All righty. And I think we are live. Just make sure. There we go. All righty. Yep. Well, hello again, friends. This is Chaz from Bookish Chaz. I am joined by my esteemed colleague here, Karl from Geek on My Sleeve.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
so it's such a pleasure to have you on again and talk about Foundation. I've been really excited for this geek out. So,
Yeah, me too. Surprisingly enough, before you mentioned it, I don't know if it just hadn't been on my radar in a long time or I hadn't even been exposed to it, but I am a huge Dune fan. And when you told me they had a TV series coming out and that this was kind of one of the original science fiction that Dune and Star Wars and everything drew inspiration from, I'm like, sure, yeah, like I'll give it a shot. I've probably been through all 8 of the Dune books in, I don't know, like 10 times, the original 6 more than that. It's like one of my go-tos. Every 6 months or so, I'll go back and do a reread. And I think you're just starting a new reread on Dune, right?
yeah, yep. I'm starting that September 1st.
All
So,
right. Shameless
yeah.
plug. We got the Discord link below, right?
Yeah, we got the Discord link below, and so we're doing that group read. So that's exciting, and you've joined in
Yes.
to do the buddy read with us, so that'll be fun.
Yes. Yes. It's coming up on that 6-month marker. So I'm glad to have some buddies to chat with it. Um,
Yeah,
but the foundation, very much so in the same category, if you will, of Dune. And I'll try not to do any major Dune spoilers, but um, definitely like later on in the series, I don't know if it was just like I wanted to see that it was like Dune or just like the foreshadowing. I'm like, is this going to follow similar path of Dune? So it's yeah, I'm looking forward to continuing the book, and it's a shorter novel, right? I think on
it
audio it was like
is.
8 hours.
Yeah, it was only a little over, I don't think it was even a full 250 pages, or it was right around there anyway. It's a very
Mhm.
short book, and
Mhm.
lots of fun. It's much more political than Dune is, I think. Dune
Yes.
has the political stuff in it, but it's much more philosophical,
Mhm.
and there's a lot more political meandering in this book. So, uh,
Mhm. I see
yeah,
that. I
yeah,
really do.
but
Um, Sorry, go ahead.
no, that's good. And just to give anybody who's watching this a quick synopsis, the basic plot structure is that there is a visionary in the far future of humanity named Harry Seldon, who has come up with a scientific theory known as psychohistory, in which he can predict the future, specifically the future fall of the Galactic Empire and the rise of a second empire. And he orchestrates putting together a foundation to catalog the history of humanity for uh, what would you call it, for uh, not posterior purposes, but for the good of future generations to
Right.
to to
Right.
know about. Yeah, and so that's the basic structure. And if you want to see a spoiler free review, link is in the description below. I did do one of those as well,
You
just
did a
so
great
everybody's
job on
aware.
that, by the way.
Oh,
Like
thank you.
super, super spot on. We always struggled to get like enough information in the spoiler free, but still keep it spoiler free. But like yours was great.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate
Yeah,
that, Karl.
yeah,
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to do, and this video tonight will be spoiler filled. So anybody who's watching, if you don't want spoilers for Foundation, click off now. You can go watch that review and come back once you've read it. It's a quick read, like Karl said. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It's I really enjoy these types of books. The ones we've talked about it a lot on our streams, Peter and I, where like one of the nice things about books is like you get to walk a mile in the character's shoes, right? And kind of like get that empathy and just like a different perspective on it. And this book, I want to say it's like 100, 150, 200 years, somewhere around that takes place. We get like 5 parts, a couple different time hops.
Right.
And like the average everyday person, we're so caught up in our own world that we don't get that huge scope. But then this book, it's like, hey, like we're talking a whole galactic empire, so old and vast that like they don't, at one point they talk about the origin of humanity, right? Like
Right.
that's just how far into the future this is. And we really get to see as they talk about like mob psychology and just like the powers that be and just humanity as a whole on such a large scale. And well, it's not quite as heavy as he said about the philosophy with Dune. It still kind of makes you stop and think, just looking at the big picture with some of that stuff.
It really
So
does. Yeah.
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 Um, I don't want to do any major spoilers, but to kind of along the Dune overlap, is all right if I read an excerpt from like Goodreads summary
Oh yeah.
that like
Yeah.
just to see some overlap. So
Most definitely. Go for it.
super pumped about doing the reread with you guys on Dune. On our channel, we got up to book 4, which is one of my favorites. And as you talked about, using psychohistory and everything, they kind of like mapped out how to prevent this fall and everything using math and formulas and so on and so forth. But book 4, got Emperor Dune. Let me see here. So uh towards the end of it, he talks about like a rebellion has risen, led by Siona, a member of Atreides' family, has risen to oppose the despot's rule. But Siona is unaware that Leto's vision of a golden path for humanity requires her to fulfill a destiny she never wanted. So, like in book 4, it's all about his golden path for humanity and how like he manipulates things. And sure enough, like first book of the Foundation is about like this path for humanity, both taking place in the far future. Dune's a little bit more post-apocalyptic, where Foundation's like
Right.
right at the start of the potential galactic apocalypse. As everything breaks down, we go back to coal and oil and kind of like backslide. Refer to them as barbarians, and yeah. So
Right.
um,
Yeah,
I love.
there is a really great similarity there. I'm glad you read it because, yeah, it's very appropriate to this discussion. And I think in many ways, Foundation has a much more positive outlook on the path uh, and uh, and the power struggles and things like that than Dune does. At least
Mhm.
in the first book, it does take a much more, pessimistic view of those in power. The Fremen are out to, um,
Mhm.
rebel and get rid of those power structures. And Foundation is much more positive in that light. There's one point in the book where Harry Seldon talks about the fact that essentially the Empire is not a bad thing. What it's become is a bad thing, but the idea of a galactic empire, if done right, can be a very good thing. And he takes a very idealized view of a galactic empire, but his psychohistory predicts the necessary fall of this empire, with the hope that a future empire will arise in its place. So I thought that was kind of interesting. That's not what you typically see.
Yeah. And I would like to believe that he's an idealist, but as we get to see, at least in the first book, so much of what he does and says is to kind of make sure that the probabilities line up as much as possible for the desired result, right? Like
Exactly.
everything relies on the statistics for the whole mob mentality. And like during the first I'm trying to remember how they termed it, pretty much like opening of the tomb, or like he revisits at like the 50-year marker.
Yes.
He comes out and says, hey, everything you guys have been working for has been a lie. Really, I was trying to maneuver my, for lack of better words, cult, our foundation, to be in a position to take advantage of the fall. And in a sense, like the overarching goal of having kind of the encyclopedia there to help them was true, but it was more so that they could be in a position to take advantage of the situation and kind of build the galactic empire he talked about as not being a bad thing, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. He was very much. Yeah, he was very much that visionary, but it had to happen in a certain way, and he knew that it would not happen on I forget the name of the planet they were on, but they ended up being his group ended up being sent to this desolate planet, which was Terminus. I think Terminus was where they got sent.
Sounds right. Yeah.
And then it seemed like at the beginning like that was a punishment, but later on you find out he planned that all along.
He was
He
counting on it.
he was counting on Terminus being their location, an ideal spot for them to build on. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when everything collapsed, they're kind of away from everything, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
yet in between 4 different fragment states that turn into kingdoms that they then have to kind of play them off of each other, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. What did you think about I think it was like part 3, and forgive me as I jump around, but
No, that's okay.
I found it very interesting how like in part 3, after the mayor kind of like takes over kind of like the religion of technology and how they use
Yeah.
that to kind of bring the kingdoms back out of the fossil fuel exclusive age, and kind of like run a college where they train these people, but they use the mysticism of the technology to where like it's all religion. And so much of everybody just believes in it, right? Like the
Yeah.
kingdom's people believe in it. Yeah. What'd you think about all that?
I thought that was really quite fascinating, and it was interesting to see the foundation go from its beginnings, its roots, to and how it becomes this. You used the term earlier, cult, and that's really kind of what it turns into. Um, yeah, it becomes this cult that nobody is willing to throw down. In fact, later on in the book, when uh, when this group over here, I forget the name right offhand, but they're sending all of their ships to attack
Mm-hmm.
Terminus, and then ultimately the religion gets the better of it, and uh, they shut down the power on all the ships and basically retake control, and it was all
Yeah.
due to the fact that the religion of it had gotten so big, nobody was
And if
willing to
I
step on them.
yeah, the royal family, it was like the king's uncle
Right.
um completely underestimated the power. Like even the king who gets held up by all this stuff and knows of the mimicry, like believes in it.
Mm-hmm.
Um
Yep.
but the high priest on the in the fleet, I think, is like one of their natives, but he got
Mm-hmm.
trained by the Foundation
He
and like
did.
all this stuff. And so the uncle, I think the name is Venus. Um, yeah, yeah.
Interesting name,
Um,
right?
hmm um, he probably figured like, oh, this is a native, like, oh, these are my people, their loyalties to us and everything. Yet
Mm-hmm.
the high priest pretty much leads the revolt and overthrows Venus's son, who is the
Mm-hmm.
admiral. And it just like it really hit home the scene where the admiral's like, in my mind, like I see like spit flying out of his mouth, telling him like, like seize him, arrest him, like this is my day, just not
Right.
even believing that um his fleet will um not listen to him, right? And
Mhm.
then the high priest is like, sees him, and like you see where the power lies.
Right.
um
Yeah, Burden is a very powerful individual. Too. You can tell how cocky he is. He
mhm.
knows he's got it in the bag. He's got this all planned out, and
Mhm.
right down to the body shield,
Yes,
which is
yes,
a which is another place that I saw a reference for Dune.
yes.
Yeah,
I
but
there was a lot of those.
yeah.
Um, before I miss it, uh, the little Easter eggs, and I want to say it was intentional, but
Mhm.
the anniversaries, I believe they always came on March 14th.
Yep.
So 314 Pi Day, a
Mhm.
bunch of scientists and everything. So I thought that was a clever little nod to pie jokes.
Yeah,
Um,
that was very intentional, I'm sure. Yeah.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Uh, yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's always hard with books. You always wish that there was more there, but like I appreciate the pacing. But I
Mhm.
think like especially towards the end when we got to like the traitor arc where like trade and
Mhm.
democracy is kind of like coming back in the universe. I would have really enjoyed seeing more during those periods and kind of like playing in the space and the universe a little bit more.
I would
Um,
too, yeah.
yeah, I haven't looked at the later series. I assume they're a little bit longer, but like each part was very on point with like, okay, what is this big catastrophe or this big pivotal moment on the path to, are we going to pass it or not? Right? Like they're pretty
Right.
good odds. There's not like absolute certainty, but oh, I always draw blanks with names. Harry, the founder,
Yeah, Harry Seldon.
Harry Seldon, he was pretty confident that they would get to the first 80 years, which I think is at the end of
Mhm.
part 3.
It
And
is,
then
right.
we move into kind of the space age where we need these other kingdoms to become reliant on us even further, right?
Mhm. Right.
So, um, Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting as they moved along. It got much more hard to determine. Like at first, it seemed pretty clear what each of the Selden events were. But
Hmm.
then as it got on, there were people that were saying, I think this might be another Selden event, but they weren't really quite sure. But they were
Hmm.
just kind of going into it on a hunch. Whereas in the previous epochs, it seemed like the Selden events were more defined in
Right.
terms of where in the timeline they were going to fall and when it would happen.
Very clear cut.
Yeah.
I think there's even a part in there where, the mayor at the time was talking about how people claim like every year, on the campaign trail, we're approaching another,
Right.
event, right? Doom and
Typ-
gloom around the corner. Yeah.
Typical politician, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. It's very interesting because we go from part of the Galactic Empire, they get exiled, everything's very structured, high technology, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
I really appreciate when we have the new mathematician who joins the order, we kind of get a glimpse through his eyes what like the capital of the
Hmm.
empire is. And you talk about all the different influences in like Star Wars, like the main capital of Coruscant, where it's like just this giant big mega city. In my
Yeah.
mind, that's exactly what he comes to, where when he goes to the surface, he's like on it forever and ever and ever. He's like, "Are we a half mile up?" And he's like, "No, we're only 500 feet up." Like the
Right.
majority of your trip in the elevator was just getting up above ground.
Hmm.
So these people, like, it's just so packed that they have like literally gone underground just to keep people living, space to live and run the
Right.
empire. And then at the very end of the book, we're at the point where the foundation is now kind of like combining the power of church and state together into one
Yeah.
individual, right?
Hmm.
So like we started out where um the foundation, when they get to the new planet, help me with the names.
Oh yeah, Terminus.
Terminus, thank you.
Yeah.
Like they don't really have a government, it's just a board of scholars,
Right.
right? And then
Hmm.
we go through to where, it's like part 2 or 3, it's like only 10% of the world's population is actually working on the project. The other
Hmm.
90%, nearly a million of them, are just people living there. And then the rise of the technology religion and how the government, the world. Um, hey,
Hey
Carlos.
Carlos, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, good to see you, buddy. Um, how like the foundation or the encyclopedias, I think they refer to them
Yeah, the
as,
encyclopedist, right? Yeah.
they lose their influence and their power, and then it goes to like the local government, and then by the end of it, it's the local government slash the church that is then spread across all 4 of these other kingdoms around
Hmm.
us, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it's an interesting journey.
It is, and really kind of comes to a point where Selden is more of a he's more of a god of sorts, because
Hmm.
he went from being the founding father to this mythical creature that's
Right.
set all this in motion. And I kind of wonder, there were comments made towards the end of the book about his return, and it almost implied like he would be like transferred into another body or something, like actually make a physical return. Did you get that, or was that just me?
I wondered the same thing, but I kind of perceived it more of maybe like kind of like a Christian Catholicism, kind of like reference or similarity there, right? Because there there's like the Great Spirit, which would be like the god of technology and everything, right? And then,
Right.
like you said, Harry's almost a god in himself, but he's more almost in the analogy like Jesus, the Messiah that walked amongst us and put us on this
Right.
path to salvation. And the whole
Yeah.
reason why we have this great book, the encyclopedia here to um, do the magic or yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm interested though. Is it 5 or 7 books in the series?
There's 7 books in the series, although I think there's only 3 books in the original arc. So
Okay.
there's Foundation, and Empire, and then Second Empire. I think makes up the original arc, and then he did write the other 4 books as well. But I don't know. I don't know how closely tied they are to the original 3 books.
Okay. So they
Yeah.
might, yeah, I'm looking at Goodreads now. Yeah, so maybe they jump around a bit and get us some history. Maybe
Right.
then we can stop and smell the roses.
Yeah. I
Um,
yeah, I kind of got a similar vibe to what Dune was. He wrote the original 6 books, and then you got all this mythos that's been written about it since. But it
yeah, yeah.
and so yeah, I think it's a similar thing, with the exception of the fact that Isaac Asimov wrote all of the Foundation stuff. It wasn't turned over to anybody else after he died, so it was just kind of this complete thing sitting out there.
Yeah.
And
And
from what I
oh,
understand, it has a very loose connection to the robot series, iRobot and stuff like that.
okay.
It's in the same universe, I believe, or like the same
Okay.
multiverse even. But I don't know a whole lot about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Something I think you talked about in your spoiler-free review that I just wanted to reiterate too. Um, like this was originally published 40s, 50s,
Yeah.
and as far as like science fiction goes, like I feel it held up really well.
I think it did too. Yeah.
Because we're talking nearly like 60, 70 years at this point. And granted, they really didn't get into a lot of the actual techno babble, which I
Mhm.
think probably helps, but just yeah, just I see why it's a classic and still
Yeah.
worth reading, even though there's all these
Absolutely.
other great series out there.
Absolutely. Yeah. It does feel very much still future in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
For instance, with the nuclear power. Uh,
Hmm.
I thought that was really interesting that in Asimov's vision of the future, nuclear is still the primary sought after uh, energy source.
Hmm.
And right now in our day, it's very possible that nuclear power could still be a thing, many
Hmm.
years in our future. I
Absolutely.
There's people that
It,
are still trying to avoid a Chernobyl thing happening again. Uh,
right.
but
Right.
but the reality is that if it's handled well, done safely, nuclear could still be a very viable option. Um,
Yeah, I am by no means an expert in it, but from my understanding, it
this one.
it
Haven't read that one.
it's more of the waste that's the issue than anything else when it comes to the nuclear power.
Right.
So when you
Exactly.
go to a galactic scale, there's probably a lot more easier ways to quote unquote hide that waste or dispose of it than when you're landlocked on a world.
Right. Exactly.
So
Yeah, even though it doesn't say, they probably found some random planet somewhere to offload all the nuclear waste onto that
Mm-hmm.
it's not inhabited or whatever. So I could see
Mm-hmm.
something like that happening. Yeah. But I
Yeah.
thought that was interesting that nuclear played such a big part in this, and we're just barely starting to scratch the surface of what nuclear could be.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And this is 70 years ago when it first came out. So
that's what Nevada is for. Oh, Carlos.
yep, yep.
Yeah,
Um,
that's funny.
so not to bounce around too much, but
Yeah, no.
you were telling me that Apple is coming out with a series.
Yes. Yeah, it comes out September 17th or 23rd, I think,
Okay.
on Apple TV Plus. Yeah. So, and it's interesting. I'm not sure exactly how they're going to do it. I mean, it looks like it's going to be good. I saw the trailers and it looks
Nice.
really fun, but I think they're going to have to take a lot of liberties, to be honest.
Okay.
And I don't know what your opinion is, but the way the at least with this first book, the way it's written seems like it would be hard to adapt, since it deals with a lot of short stories, essentially.
Right. Right.
So
The each part's broken into the different arcs.
right,
Yeah.
yeah,
I can certainly see that. I'm just excited to see these types of stories, this and Dune and the other ones actually getting some screen time.
oh yeah,
Um, I think with Game of Thrones success, everybody else is now a little bit more, I guess, willing to take a shot on some of these series. And I'm a
hmm,
big Game of Thrones fan,
oh yeah,
but
me too.
like Dune, amazing. Foundation, like I'm really looking forward to continue the series and see how it goes, see how close it lines up with the way Frank Herbert did Dune.
Right.
Um, yeah, yeah.
Now we just got to get them to do Hyperion.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah. Maybe if Foundation does well enough, somebody will try adapting Hyperion.
I wouldn't be surprised. Like every time one of these older series has some success, it just increases the odds, right?
Hmm. Yeah. So, good question, Carlos. I mean, definitely Hyperion, like we talked about. I really do hope that Foundation is a success, and I hope Dune is a success as well.
Mm-hmm.
I hope they make more of the Dune books as a result.
Yes,
Um,
please. Yes, please. There's
and
so
then
many amazing series that I'd
there,
love to see
there
adaptations for.
absolutely, yeah, there are a ton of them, and science fiction does really well for adaptations. With
Mm-hmm.
The Expanse is done superb, and I said
I would
I oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, you're good.
No, I was just going to chime in. Like, I would love to see any of Brandon Sanderson's stuff. Like, the
Oh
Stormlight
yeah.
Archive would be amazing. Mistborn would be amazing. If we're kind of keeping in the sci-fi realm, um, oh, just drew a blank on it. I think it's like Adrian Tchaikovsky's. Um,
Oh, is it Children of
the
Time?
Yes, that is kind of a
Yeah,
similar type style where there's a lot of these time hops, but it would be a
I've
lot of
heard
fun to
that.
see a series like that, an adaptation like that would be great.
Yeah.
Um, Super pumped. Have you done Wheel of Time? Have you read it?
I read the first two books and I reread the
Okay.
book. I'm slowly working to finishing it, but I had to watch the Wheel of Time series. Most
I'm
definitely.
pumped about that and the fact that they have Brandon Sanderson involved.
Oh yeah, that's
Um,
huge.
mhm,
He'll
mhm.
he'll keep them on track, I think.
Yes, yes,
And
yeah,
yeah.
a lot of good stuff. Um,
Oh, that would yeah, that would be interesting to see what they do with God Emperor. Yeah.
Reminds me of a tweet I think you were referencing of the book cover of that same one, where I had the giant worm on it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know if we need to keep it PG for the stream, but yes, I would love to see a modern movie poster of that too.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, we don't necessarily need to keep it PG, but it the God Emperor on that does kind of look like a okay, Carlos wants it to keep it PG. Okay,
uh,
we'll just say it resembles a certain body part, and we'll leave it at that.
yes. All
So,
hail the God Emperor and his magnificence. Um,
um,
Gosh, we really got off the main beaten path, but like at
yeah,
the same
it's
time, they're all tied together with the foundation and the influences, right?
they are, yeah, they very much are, and I will be curious to see where it goes. I don't think we've seen the last of Harryson in terms of his influence. I think
Mm-hmm.
I get the impression that that's
He will
going to be a
rise
thing
again.
throughout the series. Yeah, in some form or another. Whether it's more, maybe he made more secret recordings. Who knows?
It would make sense at the very beginning of the book when we meet him. He seems to imply like he has 5 years left or something around there.
Hmm.
And the foundation has like 6 months before they take off and leave.
Okay.
And I think he stays behind or something like that. So that
Right.
means that gives him several more years to do more calculations, more projections, more recordings, so on and so forth.
Hmm.
So, and trying to remember, do we see him? I know we see him at 50 and 80. Do we see him again later?
We don't. I think that was
Um,
the last time we saw him was at 80, and
because I
then
know
that was it.
we had the one tradesman that got put on trial and kind of had all
Hmm.
that.
Right.
And then ran for office and had the
Yeah,
religious upbringing. Yeah.
that was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I'm with you. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of him in the next two books.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll be very curious to see where it goes. I was a little disappointed that we didn't see more of his protege that right at the beginning of the book.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
I
We get
I
emotionally invested in him, and then
yeah,
like, so what?
right. Yeah, he just kind of disappears and yeah.
I would
BattleTech,
love
Red
to see some
Rising.
BattleTech.
Yeah, that would be cool. Red Rising as well, I've heard would make a good adaptation. Empire of
Hmm.
Silence, is that the Christopher Rocchio one that just I feel like I've heard that, but I haven't read it, but the name sounds familiar. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
No, you're fine, Carlos. It's cool to talk about it.
all
Yeah.
good. I'm
Yeah.
a huge BattleTech Mech Warrior fan, so I would love to see any and everything adaptation wise with that.
Right.
Um,
Gundam too. I think it would be cool to see a live action Gundam.
Giant stomping robots, yes, please.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But yeah,
um,
going back to his protege though, I really feel like that character was just kind of very underused. I would have hoped that we would have at least seen him continue into the 50-year mark and
mhm.
kind of be around there, but I don't really know if we even heard what happened to him.
I'm with you. I think some readers that could be a big turnoff for them,
Mhm.
because typically you get at least a character or something that you get like emotionally invested to, and that's kind of like part of what you follow, even if it is a plot driven book
Mhm.
like this. And I think that's something that Dune did really well. Like even though we don't follow a single character as they do the time hops, you're still
Right.
following like the Atreides line and don't want to do too much spoilers, but there's other things where you can still kind of see the different people interconnected along the storyline. So there's that kind of overarching tie together. And at the beginning of the book with his protege, he's used as a tool to kind of introduce us to
Mm-hmm.
the government and the foundation and the reason behind it and everything. And you kind of get emotionally invested in him.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I was kind of like when I got to part 2 or 3, like trying to see if I was like missing anything, especially on the reread. I'm like, okay, like is he referenced again later? Like, is there anything, or is it just like, oh nope, like you might be my successor, but just kidding. Part 2. Now here we are, after we did the thing that we said we were going to do, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I felt like even Harry Seldon was kind of underused.
Mm-hmm.
Other than doing his 50-year mark and 80-year mark announcements, he kind of didn't show up. I felt like the most character development we got was from Mayor Hardin, and also for
Yep.
the Traders Guild. I think we got the most character development for them.
And that could just maybe the author getting feedback and getting a little bit more polished. But I agree,
Right.
like with the mayor, we get some more out of him when we get to see him in 2 arcs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, like you said, the tradesmen and everything, we kind of get to see them and get a little bit more emotionally attached to them.
Mm-hmm.
But aside from that, I struggle to keep track of names and people, especially as everything's going on. But I know other people, like my brother, would just be like, like, well, what's all this name dropping? Why do we care? What's going on?
Yeah, I had a time keeping track of some of the names too. Uh, it's kind of like Game of Thrones in that sense. With the Song of Ice and Fire books, George R. R. Martin has how many million different characters that
Yes,
he talked
yes,
about, and this felt
but at
like that.
least you have like different like ways to understand how they're all tied together, like very
Yes.
distinct last names and
Yeah.
where they hail from and all that stuff. Um, so
I didn't think all the names were so bad. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. I can understand that. They're not bad per se. It's just they can be kind of hard to keep track of if they're not names that are always at the forefront, I guess is my thing. But yeah, I
And
not necessarily a bad thing. You're right, Liam.
I guess I struggled with just keeping track of them because we switched each time we went to a different section, different part,
Right.
where you, at least for other books, I'm used to kind of like, okay, as long as I keep track of these main people, I'm all right. But it's essentially collection of short stories. Um, but yeah, still a lot of fun. Still able to keep track of the whole overarching plot,
Mhm.
um, and the factions and everything. Looking forward to seeing the world a little bit more now that we're spacefaring again at the end of the first book.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's been up a lot to the world that he's created.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it definitely isn't
Well
a novel
said,
with
Liam.
consistent characters. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I think uh, I think we felt the influence of Mayor Hidden more than we
Mm-hmm.
did Harry Seldon, even just
Yeah.
because Harry Harry Seldon was at his heart a philosopher and a scientist, whereas Hardin is the politician. He's the
Yep.
one that really makes everything work like clockwork. So
Mm-hmm.
uh right down to the beginning of his quote unquote empire, we orchestrates a
Right.
coup
Yes.
to
Yes.
take over things. So yeah, he's definitely the politician.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we get to see a lot more of him than we do Harry.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely.
So,
Yeah.
um,
But overall, what do you think? Would you recommend this book to people?
so, for those people who aren't familiar with our channel, Pete is my co-host. I don't know that it's one he would really get into. One, he's an action junkie, and there's not a whole lot of like physical action in this.
Right.
It's very much more political, much more philosophical. He'll even admit as much um, that he'll follow that stuff if it helps keep the story along, but he's not as interested.
Makes
I
sense.
think one of our geek outs we did with you was it book 2 of Mistborn, which it's much more politically heavy, and that
Yes,
was his
very.
least favorite book. Where for me, like I enjoy that stuff, the strategy of like the pieces on the board and everything, trying to see what's going to happen. I definitely feel that if people like books like Dune and those type novels, this one is definitely one they should check out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if they felt that Dune was too slow or there wasn't enough quick pace, things moving, that you rather follow, a couple characters as they grow and progress and develop,
Mm-hmm.
probably not a book for them.
Right.
Um, yeah. You feel that's fair?
I do. I feel that very. Yeah. This was definitely an action heavy book. Yeah, and if you don't enjoy politics, and a lot of a lot of political intrigue, then yeah, this book might not be for you. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
said, I really enjoyed it.
Oh yeah.
I think you gave it, would you say like a 4 star, 4 out of 5 star
I
on
did.
your spoiler?
Yep.
I feel that's very fair. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like it's definitely one of those books you have to be in the right mindset for. Um, but yeah, like it scratches that itch for me where you want something huge, epic,
Mm-hmm.
long reaching, kind of like see the large scope of just everything happening. Um, like this book's right there for you.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. It is very much an introduction to the world, and
mhm.
I think there's probably much more to come in the next two novels. And I don't know about you, Carl, but I'm definitely down to continue this saga,
Yeah,
see where it goes.
absolutely. Absolutely. Um, yeah, I have Audible credits to use. I'll probably pick up the next one after the stream just to get in the queue. So
Nice. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I'm hoping I'm hoping to probably get to Foundation and Empire sometime before the end of the year. Maybe who
okay.
knows, maybe even in October. September's kind of packed, but maybe even in October. So we will see. But if you're down to read it again with me, we will
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have too many good books to read, right?
It is, yeah, very much a good problem to have. Um, so I guess we're kind of coming to the wrap up portion here. Did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to add, Carl?
Not really. Really happy you recommended the book to me. Always looking for new books to add to the TBR, and I'm glad we got to this one. Especially since, as I said earlier, just like such a huge fan of Dune, and just can't get enough of it. To have something kind of like in the same vein, and themes, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it has a lot of influence, and yeah, it's really interesting to see how well, not to use a pun again, but how foundational the book is to the science fiction genre in general. Yeah, so
I see what you did there.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. So, tell us what you got coming up on the channel, Karl.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for asking. So every Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern, my brother and I, and occasionally Chaz or Carlos, when we can get some other buddies to join us, we'll do a weekly live book discussion. And this Sunday, we are continuing Viridian Gate Online, very popular lit RPG series by James A. Hunter. Pretty much, I guess even similar to this, like the end is coming, um, and instead of having the option of going to another world, they don't have that option, so they basically just upload everybody to a server as this asteroid pretty much destroys most of the surface area, and people get to live in an MMO world as kind of like an afterlife. And very fun concept, fun series. For Peter's sake, a lot more action packed, which is nice.
Right.
Um, and yeah. Really looking forward to it. And every Sunday, come hang out with us, 5
Very
p.m. Eastern.
cool. Yeah, yeah, guys. If you're watching this and you have not checked out Geek on My Sleeve yet, you are missing out. You really need to check them out. Subscribe, support them, and give them a watch. Especially if you like lit RPG. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Got to
Yes,
look out for little brother. Yeah, exactly.
yes, very true. Thank you for the
um,
kind words. And yeah, we've been having a lot of fun in the lit RPG genre. Though I appreciate it when my buddies like Chaz and Carlos give me an excuse to read other books than lit RPG. I very much have my foundation in old school fantasy, like Chaz with Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, and
mhm.
all those good old classic fantasy novels and sci-fi.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's cool. And speaking of Margaret Weiss, I watched an interview with her. It was from a couple of years ago, but at that time she hinted that there was something special coming for the Deathgate cycle, and
Mm.
and of course, then I think that's about around the time when COVID happened. So it's that's probably been
Could
delayed, but
that be an adaptation coming?
maybe it could. That would be very
Mm,
cool. That's one
mm.
that's becoming one of my favorite series. So I would love to see that. And yeah, it's got a lot of potential there. So yeah.
That's exciting.
Yep, it is. So more to come on that. We'll keep our ears open for it. Um, as far as my channel goes, guys, I've got a review out tomorrow for Nightmare of the Wolf, which is the animated prequel to The Witcher. And next week I'll have a review coming from The Sea by Aaron Morgenstern, and some other fun stuff as well. So stay tuned to the channel, and I think that about wraps it up, guys. Sure, you read books. Have a
Yes.
good one.
Thanks for having me, Chaz. Bye,
Yeah, thanks
everybody.
a lot, Karl. Buddy.